So this was fun.
Okay, I'm losing RPM.
Yay, I'm taking off and losing engine power. Not a lot, but enough to make you a little worried
Okay.
about the trees below you.
Come
on
on,
the
baby.
ground, at a low altitude, in hot temperatures, high density altitude, in a underperforming aircraft. And let's give that another shot. After all, it's a Cessna 150. I'm in a relatively humid area with a coast nearby, and the conditions are often susceptible to carb ice. So we all know that Cessna 150s are prone to carb ice, so it could have just been that. And you can see I'm taking off. Once again, the RPM is a little bit lower than I'd like it to be, but it's still within the range. And as I'm passing the runway, and about 100 to 200 feet off the ground, it starts to lose, about 10, 20, or 30 RPM. Now, that doesn't seem all that dramatic on the camera, but in a Cessna 150 on a hot day, you feel every little drop in power. And here in this clip, I'll show you, after doing a second run up and deciding to fly, which seems foolish in retrospect, well, it also felt foolish while I was doing it, I'm getting like the full 2600 RPM. You can definitely hear the difference in power between the first takeoff and the second takeoff.
Okay, so it's been a month since I've actually really flown this plane. I had a second carb ice or power loss incident in a row, a week apart. That kind of rattled me, so I decided to ground the plane until I got it looked at by a mechanic. I was due for an oil change anyway, so why not do the oil change, check a few things, and so on. Didn't find anything conclusive, and the only thing we can think of is carb ice. Compressions were all in the 70s. A little bit of blow-by on the rings, but that's, whatever. Everything's serviceable. Yeah, so I'm a little apprehensive, a little nervous. It is pretty bad conditions for carb ice again. So I'm a little apprehensive with this takeoff.
So if I'm a little worried about carb ice,
Okay,
I will
full power.
taxi with the carb heat on and do a full static run with the carb heat on.
Nope.
Give it 5 or 10 seconds and then turn the carb heat off before doing my roll. Yeah, I understand, that's unfiltered air or whatever, but
Nope,
sometimes
that did not
you
work.
just got to make sure you clear the ice out of the carburetor in this plane. So as soon as I put in the power, it felt a little janky right off the bat, even though the carb heat was on. I understand how that feels. And I didn't quite get the power I was looking for, even though it kind of looks like it hit it on that roll. So I'm being extra cautious here. Went back for a second run up and a second chance to really be sure I'm clearing out the ice. I want ice. I want to eliminate ice as a probable cause for this engine issue 100%. So on this takeoff, again, another full static RPM with the carb heat on. Give it a chance to clear the ice, turn off the heat, and I'll do even something extra. I'll fly in ground effect for a bit with the carb heat on, just to really clear out that ice if there's any there. Turn the heat back off and pull up, and everything looked like it was running good here. Until it wasn't.
50. 55, 60. Eval traffic, Uniform Victoria Hotel, Airborne 31, remaining at circuit.
Yeah, there was a slight drop. You can almost hear it here. And, I did something really risky. I did one last check, one last clearing for carb ice, and did that, and then put the heat back off, and the power did not return. In fact, it was still getting worse. At that point, I knew for 100% sure there's no carb ice, and this engine just does not feel right. Definitely need to turn back while I still have power and land on 08 as planned. Now don't mind all the bouncing. It is a very thermally day and gusty. It looks like I'm over controlling. I'm not, I promise. Yeah, so that flight was so fast that I managed to turn back into my own wake on landing.
No, I don't like that.
Okay, I think it's also important to add that when my aircraft was in with the mechanic, he did run a test on the spark plugs for resistance. So you check the resistance with Tempest's resistance checking tool, which will give a red light if a spark plug fails the resistance test, or a green light if it's within the safe range. Now, this test is not a standard, it's not a mechanical standard, it's not a technical standard, but they suggest that if a spark plug's making more than 5,000 ohms resistance, it's not suitable for flight, or they suggest changing them. There's no legal standard, there's no technical standard, so my mechanic was suggesting that maybe it's time to change these, but he also mentioned that they are testing well in the equipment and everything, so they're kind of working, and he doesn't have any conclusive information as one way or another as to what is true. So my mechanic was suggesting that maybe it's time to change the spark plugs, but also gave me the option to just try it out and see if everything's good, and then maybe we change them at the annual. However, I looked back in my logs and looked back to when the spark plugs were last changed, and it turns out they were changed 700 hours ago, 12 years ago. Way too old. Time to change them. Okay, so the cowl's off. I'm going to take these off, take the sparkle lid off. But before I do, I'm going to test with my multimeter these for resistance. That way I don't put in a bad plug. I want to confirm all the plugs are good. I'm going to also check the gap them if necessary, apply the thread anti-seize and put them in and torque them to spec. Yeah, that's two. Ooh. There we go. Click. Oh, yeah. There you go. Okay, so here are the old spark plugs, and they're not in the best shape, but they all technically still work, at least according to the test equipment my mechanic has. But that doesn't necessarily mean the spark plug's good. So inside these spark plugs there's a resistor with a spring, and that resistor can go bad. But also, I have an anecdotal theory that if there's something broken in here, I bet you there's enough voltage still to make the spark plug appear to be working and spark, but maybe not the most efficient spark or properly timed spark. So that's what I'm assuming what's happening with mine, because I would get poor performance, but then after about 10 minutes of flying, I'd get better performance. And nothing seemed to explain that, but maybe as these spark plugs heat up, something expands and it makes better contact. So I just want to show you something real quick with this multi-tester. So I have it on continuity mode here. So you can probably hear a beep when these two leads touch. Now check this out. So I'll put in the lead on one end here and touch the electrode, and that should give continuity, but we got nothing. Now if I measure the resistance, now I think my ohm meter here isn't quite working well, because as you can see it's still showing 1 kilo ohm, but if I bridge it, you know, we get 0. So at least if we see a drop, we know the resistance is good. All of these failed except for one. As you can see, there will be no drop, none whatsoever. Now I think the range is 1,000 to 5,000 ohms, which this is not reading up to 5,000, but since we're getting no drop, there's like nothing at all, and there's definitely no continuity. In the good spark plug, the 7th or 8th spark plug, that's still good, I do get about 200 ohms, so I know that part actually works. But another thing is, if I try to do continuity just on this, I get nothing, which is crazy, because you're supposed to get at least something. So maybe that one there. Here, nothing. And again, like all of these, just even on the same metal, this is not good. So that means there's like a lot of resistance. So whatever spark I'm getting is like really struggling. Okay, maybe a little on that one. Let's push down on this. Yeah, nothing. Let me scrape it away. Nothing. So if a spark will go to the path of least resistance. Now that I could still get a spark here, but that means it could be arcing in here. It could be arcing down the wire, or worse, inside the magneto. And that's where you can do some damage to your magneto. And if you remember my older videos, I've had bad magnetos, and I imagine these plugs had something to do with ruining that magneto before its time. So okay, so I'm just showing you that like even on this hinge, I'm getting continuity. Like in this dirty old hinge with some paint on it, and like these, I'm getting nothing. And these all sparked in the test equipment. So if your spark plugs are old, but they're still sparking, check how many hours you've been on these plugs. If it's more than 500, you probably should change them. Also, this is the older design where it has the screw and a resistor in there, and Champion has since changed that design. So if I were you, and this is just my opinion, if you still have screws in your spark plugs, maybe it's time to change them. And I'll show you what's inside here. And there's a spring. And like, look at all this dust and junk that came out. So here's the resistor. Pretty sure that snapped in half. And, you know, you got the spring and like, there's rust on it, or possibly electrical arcing on there. It just seems weird to have this. So the newer ones are all solid state. They don't have this spring in here with the resistor. So you can go either Champion or Tempest. And they both have the new solid design. But yeah, if you have these plugs and they're old, you know, they appear to be working, but you know, maybe you got more than 500 hours on them, do the resistance check. Tempest has a little tool for that, but you could also use a multimeter and one that's working. And if you get above 500 ohms, you chuck them. And really, you shouldn't be cheaping out on these, because the damage can go back into your magnetos and then crossfire in the magneto, and that just gets more expensive. You know, it's just a whole chain of crap. And you really shouldn't be flying with bad spark plugs anyways.
So it's above my minimums for temperature, and the visibility is crap. So I'm not going to fly today. Just going to do a ground run and a run up. The engine already sounds better. Okay, so normally the engine runs rough while I'm taxiing like this, but it feels fantastic right now. Okay. Full static. Okay, that's a lot smoother. Carbeat off. I'm getting full 2600 RPM. Yeah. Satisfied.
Okay, so you can see it turned out pretty good. I got the power I was expecting on right from the get-go. No weird warm-ups or anything like that. And I gotta say, the plane flies a lot smoother, and there's just a totally different gut feel with the engine. You know, everything was always correct numbers-wise and, you know, within parameters or whatever, but the whole time I had the plane, I always had this kind of bad gut feeling about how the engine felt, even though I couldn't quantify it, or maybe I brushed it off as being, you know, different because it's a 150, and maybe that's just how Continental O-200s are. But yeah, I never really fully trusted the engine. So I always had a little fear flying. I cannot express how different my comfort level is since changing the spark plugs. So now the engine runs smooth. I now understand all those posts and comments of how people love their O-200-As. I get it now. It's a smooth running, humming machine. You don't quite notice it on video, the difference, but when you're flying, it sounds healthier, it runs smoother, and it makes more power. I actually feel safer in the airplane now, which is a great feeling. So it's been great. As you can see in these clips, the plane's humming along just fine. And yeah, I just need to get back in the air and back flying. So I'll see you around in the next one. And thank you for watching.